We had travelled 200 sea miles from Skerries, County Dublin in Ireland, to Tobermory on the Isle of Mull in Scotland. We had sailed non-stop through the night and arrived in Tobermory 34 hours after leaving Skerries. It was time to look at this beautiful Scottish town. Tobermory is the capital of the Isle of Mull, and if its quaint array of colourful house and shop fronts looks familiar, this is probably because you have seen something similar in the BBC series for children called Tobermory. The name of Tobermory is from the Gaelic Toberwuda, and this means Mary's Well. The story goes that one of the Spanish Armada ships sank here in 1588 with a bullion of gold, but so far no trace of this has been found. And if we found it, we would not be telling you. The town was developed as a fishing port since 1788, but now hosts a fine marina with excellent onshore facilities. Like many places in this part of Scotland, the town has its own whisky distillery. There is also a museum and an array of fascinating shops and eating places. The population of Tobermory is about 1,000, with about 70% of these Scottish-born. Tobermory really has two main levels, with the main street running along the seafront and other streets running parallel to this but further up the hill. The walk is worthwhile. Stream, whose name we couldn't find anywhere, rushes down the hill towards the harbour of Tobermory, and we wondered if this was used for making the local whisky. but then we found they had another source of water. Sooner than any of us wanted, it was time to leave beautiful Tobermory and head back towards Ireland. We would break the journey into several stages so that we could enjoy different places along the route. As we left Tobermory behind us, we sailed out, turning left into the western part of the Sound of Mull. Today's passage would take us all the way down the west coast of Mull, and in a fine westerly breeze to boot. On the way we would see many interesting places. Now approaching the Isle of Staffa, and we have to give it a wide berth to the west to avoid outlying rocks, some of which are almost invisible, just breaking the surface. Staffa has a very special feature that only really becomes apparent when you reach its south side. Staffa is an uninhabited plateau-like island situated about 5 nautical miles northeast of Iona. Geologists claim that it was formed from hexagonally jointed basalt columns similar in structure to the Giant's Causeway on the Northampton coast. We know better, however. We know that the Fingal in Fingal's Cave was none other than our very own Finn McCool. Apparently he had a keen interest in road construction, and Fingal's Cave and the Giant's Causeway were all part of his plan to unite Ireland and Scotland. The project wasn't completed, possibly because he overran his budget by several billion. This island has been visited by Felix Mendelssohn, Jules Verne, William Wordsworth, John Keats, Alfred Lord Tennyson, Sir Walter Scott, Turner, Queen Victoria, Liam Deneen, John Furlong and myself. Our course south took us past the famous Isle of Iona. Even today this island breathes a special air. It is only 1 nautical mile from the coast of Mull, is about 2 kilometres wide and 6 kilometres long with a population of 125. It has several interesting buildings, the abbey built around 1203, the bishop's house and the ruins of a nunnery. Its Gaelic name points to part of its history, E Columcille, the Isle of Columkill, or Columba as he was known to his Latin friends. Columkill had fled here together with 12 companions in the middle of the 6th century after a row over a book. They founded a monastery here and this became very important in these islands. It's believed that the Book of Kells may have started here. Iona played a part in the ancient kingdom of Dalriada, made up of northeast Antrim and the western Isles of Scotland, and later it played a role in the new Scottish kingdom. Our target for today was the island of Colonsay. Its name was an Old Norse word for Columba's Isle, so even the Vikings didn't want to meddle with our bold Columkill. Space is provided here for berthing 2 leisure boats, though we did find that the bollards and cleats provided were really for slightly larger boats. Colonsay measures about 13 kilometres by 5 and has 135 inhabitants. Like most of the Scottish islands, it is well served by a ferry service from Oban. Just a short walk from the harbour area, Colonsay has its one and only small hotel. Very pleasant place to spend an hour or two. One interesting fact about Colonsay is its crime rate. The last 4 recorded crimes on this island were in 2013, 2006, 2004 and 1623. Another interesting fact about Colonsay is that it claims to be the smallest island in the world with its own brewery. That is, until we start one on Colt Island.
Have to show the bottle of wine.
Absolutely, yes. This is living in harsh conditions here in Wales and Scotland. And this is all that Liam's getting.
An empty plate.
And look at him on here.
My starters.
Yes.
You know me, I'm hungry all the time.
And the skipper drinking as usual.
And I haven't got anything yet.
Wine.
Where's mine?
A half glass of wine.
Where's me grub? Sailing south, the Sound of Islay has Jura on the left to the east and Islay on the right. The Sound is about 10 nautical miles long and must be approached with a fair tide. It gives a good view of some of the 9 distilleries to be found on the Isle of Islay. Port Ellen is the largest town on the island, with good ferry connections to the Scottish mainland and also to Ballycastle in County Antrim. Our good friends in Columkill sailed here about 720 AD, since Finn McCool's road plans had come to nothing. Why Columkill continued on northwards is a bit of a mystery, but perhaps he didn't like the local whisky. The island is one of the larger ones in these parts, measuring about 22 by 17 kilometres at its widest points. It has 3,228 people. With 9 distilleries, that means there's one distillery for every 360 people. Famous Scotch whisky names such as Laphroaig, Lagavulin, Caolilla, Bunnahabhain and Ardbeg are produced here on Islay. And it was time for us to go, to leave this wonderful land and islands of the Scots and head back to Ireland, aiming for one of Ireland's most northerly points, the island of Rathlin. This island lies a mere 3 nautical miles off the North Antrim coast. It has a population of about 125. It is L-shaped, measuring about 6 kilometres from west to east and then 4 kilometres from north to south, and having less than 2 kilometres width at any one point.
And here we are with Ireland, Scotland and us.
Normally a lighthouse has a light on a tower on a hill, but Rathlin's western lighthouse seems upside down. Given its proximity to Scotland, Rathlin has been invaded by the Vikings, the Scots, the Normans and the Bissets. The Bissets? Yes, the Bissets were a Norman family and actually owned the island for a time. Robert Bruce sheltered here for a time in 1306 and had some philosophical discussion with a spider in his cave. Rathlin has known more than its fair share of massacres, starting back in 1557. In 1575, about 600 members of the MacDonalds were massacred here by the English. Not long after that, in 1642, the same clan lost out badly to the Campbells. Having no Campbells nor MacDonalds on board, we felt it was reasonably safe to approach the island. Overlooking the harbour and well blended with the local architectural style is the Manor House Hotel, a very comfortable modern accommodation for people visiting the island. Of course, as you might expect for an island that was within sight of both Scotland and Ireland, both countries wanted to get their claws into it and claim ownership of the island. Apparently the matter was eventually decided to everyone's satisfaction by a very simple piece of logic. St. Patrick had cast all the snakes out of Ireland. There were no snakes in Rathlin, therefore Rathlin was Irish. Maybe it's time to count the number of snakes on Rockhall. A beautifully carved throne presents an oddly edited extract from a poem by Seamus Heaney. When you sat far-eyed and cold in the bottled throne of the wishing chair at Giant's Causeway, the small of your back made very solid sense, like a papoose at sap time, strapped to a maple tree. You gathered force out of the world tree's hardness. If you stretched your hand forth, things might turn to stone. The Annals of Ulster report that the Vikings raided Ireland in 795 for the first time, and Rathlin was their point of arrival. Since then, of course, there have been many visitors, and nowadays Rathlin thrives on visiting tourists. There are many fine walks throughout the island, and in keeping with the Irish custom of townlands, Rathlin is not to be outdone. Even though it's a small island, it has no fewer than 22 townlands. Back in 1898, Marconi established the first commercial wireless telegraphy service between this lighthouse and Ballycastle. No matter where we go in blue air, no matter how early we start off, no matter how wild the countryside, we find there's always somebody watching us. The dreaded white van man. They seek him here, they seek him there, but white van man is everywhere. Every time I call into Glenarm, I am reminded of the several weeks I spent in the glens as a boy of 10. It was then that I learnt the story of the song Arda Huing, of the man who went for one last look at the view from his beloved Arda Huing before emigrating. This inspired him to write the song of the same name, and to put all thoughts of emigrating far from his mind. The glens are as beautiful as their very Irish names: Glen Taisa, Glen Shesk, Glen Dun, Glen Corp, Glen Ann, Glen Ballyeman, Glen Arif, Glen Cloy, and of course Glenarm. Glenarm Castle stands on lands held by the Bissett family from the 13th century. The MacDonalds took over in the 16th century and are still here today. From Glenarm we continued our journey south along the steep Antrim coast, relaxing on a day that was without wind and with a flat sea. Back in 1902, a rather unusual tourist attraction was opened on Island Magee, the peninsula just south of Larne. It was the Gobbins, a piece of man-made tourism created by Berkeley Dean Wise of the Belfast and Northern Counties Railway Company. This far-seeing man created many attractions for potential railway passengers, and the Gobbins was his most spectacular project. It consisted in a path along a cliff face, over bridges and through tunnels, with magnificent views of wildlife and of the sea. The 1930s depression, followed by the war years and a landslide, and then the troubles in the north, led to the decline of the Gobbins. It was a County Down filmmaker called John H. Lennon who inspired the restoration of the Gobbins, and the new path was built in 2004. Long advance booking is vital for anyone wanting to visit the Gobbins, unless, of course, you travel by boat. After crossing Belfast Lough, our next stop was at Bangor Marina, one of the largest and finest marinas in Ireland. Both Bangor in Down and Carrickfergus in Antrim are ideally situated for sailing visitors to Belfast. I recall a long time ago that the very first roundabout on Irish soil was located near Bangor, and for its first weeks of life, this became one of the most dangerous places to be in the country. Next day it was time to go further south along the County Down coast, heading for the fishing port of Ardglass. We were now running into familiar landmarks again, places we had passed on our non-stop trip northwards to Tobermory. For most of this journey to and from Tobermory, we had very, very light winds, not great for sailing, but much more preferable than hurricanes. In conditions such as these, we use a combination of sails and engine. A combination that gives us greater stability, more efficiency, and better speed. Once again we passed McCammon Rocks, where my great-grandfather had been shipwrecked. South Rock, the oldest wave-washed lighthouse in the world. Strangford, called the Strong Fjord by the Vikings, but it was Loch Cuan, or the Quiet Lake, to the native Irish. And then Ardglass with its small but excellent marina. It seemed almost natural to moor Blue Air on a pontoon next to a Viking ship. Ardglass is no stranger to visitors from the past, as many scenes from the Game of Thrones series were shot locally. And the town has more than its fair share of long, shaggy-bearded individuals who wear their status as extras in the Game of Thrones with considerable pride. There is even a small Game of Thrones museum in the town. one of his songs, Belfast man Van Morrison described this place as Ardglass in a jam jar. But in spite of its quiet, relaxed air nowadays, it was once one of Ulster's busiest ports. In fact, it has more medieval tower houses than any other town in Ireland. The marina that is here today is a wonderful tribute to the commitment of a small group of dedicated individuals who lobbied long and hard to make it happen. There was one last leg to our journey, the trip home to Skerries. This would bring us across that part of the Irish Sea where two tides meet, one coming from the north, the other coming from the south. As Skerries came into view, it was time to pack up, not forgetting the bottles of Bunnahowan one crew member had nursed all the way back from Scotland.
We're home. Look, he's home now, eh?
Where did we go?
Scotland.
What we do?